speaking of some teams that just released their schedule and just release and getting geared up as well and could set the stage for the G5. UConn was actually one of those teams that did release their schedule as well recently. And I'll say this about UConn. I'm getting ready to pull their schedule up shortly. I look at this schedule that we're about to see unfold right in front of our eyes, and I see a stage where Jason Candle could hit the ground running in his first year up there with the UConn Huskies.
It's going to be tough. They had a great season last year. I mean, obviously it bodes them well to be independent. And I think that they're kind of in that same boat as Notre Dame, where they're a better boat than Notre Dame because teams do want to schedule them. If I'm a P4 team right now, I'm not scheduling Notre Dame. That's why I even schedule a tough out of conference opponent like that. But yeah, I think it does bode them. But it's going to be tough. I mean, you got James Madison late in the year, Maryland week 2, which is obviously going to have, I think, 2 of the best edge rushers in the country. I know one of them for sure. And then going to Southern Miss, that's a long trip for them. That's a long trip. And Southern Miss did lose their entire team and their coach, their good coach and Coach Huff there. But it's tough. It's tough for me to even really have a good pulse on where UConn's going to be next season. I mean, they were good. They're a basketball school, primarily women's basketball, but they have been better at football these last couple seasons. I genuinely don't know what to expect. I mean, this is one of the only teams that I'm just a complete question mark on. And that's just me being completely honest, for where I stand right now.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that they do need to answer, because they are going to lose 2 incredible talents to the NFL in Skylar Bell, who we're thinking is probably going to be going sometime in day number 2, as well as Joe Vagano, their quarterback. He had an excellent season, has a real chance of being drafted as well. Really, the number one question for UConn, if anything, before anything else, before Jason Candle figures out the rest of his football team, is who is he's going to have at quarterback. He did bring a couple of kids in from the transfer portal, Jake Merlinker, who is transferring in from Tennessee. And then he also brought in Caleb Osborne out of Toledo. He didn't play much over the course of last season, but he did play in the bowl game, played admirably for Toledo in the bowl game. Wouldn't be surprised, because it is Jason Candle's guy that he did pick out of high school, if he wins the starting job. But that's really going to be the number one thing is can they find a way to suggest the successor for Joe Fagano? That's going to really determine what at least offensively, what their identity is going to be like.
I think Jake Merklinger could be a great fit if he is to be the starter. I think fitting into Jason Candle's system and with offensive coordinator, I'm going to try to pronounce this, Nunzio Campanelli. Campanelli. He runs a pro style / a spread style offense. So I think that Merklinger, coming from the Heupel system that already is a spread type system, I think that he could fit in pretty well if he were to be the starter. But I agree with AT here. They're kind of, at least from everything I gathered in my notes, they're kind of an unknown right now. They have some spots on their schedule that could be favorable. You do get the tougher teams on your schedule at home. Maryland's at home, Syracuse is at home, North Carolina is at home, James Madison is at home. So the tougher teams on your schedule you do get at home. But again, there's some tough road spots. You have to go out to Oxford, Ohio to play Miami, Southern Miss, like that. I mean, it's not an easy schedule by any stretch of the imagination, but the harder teams they do get at home. So I think Jason Candle, being the winningest coach in Toledo history, starting a new chapter here with UConn, I mean, the blueprint's there. He did it at Toledo. He brought them to relatively pretty good success for that level of football. And I think the blueprint's there. I mean, I think if you give him time, like you did with Jim Mora, allow him to get some recruits and go heavy in the portal like he has this past cycle, I think they have a chance to make some noise at some point.
Yeah, and this is another team that's like a Toledo 2.0, right? I mean, they got the coach, they got most of their players came over. That's most of their portal guys came from. So like you said, Reed, like you said, Jake, that he did have success at Toledo with this very similar roster that we're looking at here. I don't think I think some of the competition level is going to be a little bit higher. I think that they've got a couple of tough teams, and North Carolina late in the season stuff. James Madison's going to be one of the better G5 teams in the country. So I mean, it's tough. It's not an easy schedule. It's not just a walk in the park for them, but I am excited for them. I am excited to watch them play, and I hope that they can keep that level of success that they had this last season, because I mean, it is cool to have teams like them, independent teams, smaller independent teams, be good. I mean, that's what we want. Yet again, we want this game to be exciting. We want it to be fun. We want it to be interesting and unique. And when teams like UConn are good at football, it makes college football fun. So,
yeah, and I definitely want to point this out because I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. We have not one, not two, but three power conference teams being hosted by UConn. So I think that's really cool from that standpoint, because we rarely do see a power conference team willing to go on the road and play one of these G5 or G6 teams, depending on what terminology that you want to use to refer to the Pac-12 that did just come in. So the fact that you do have a Maryland at home, you have a Syracuse at home, and a North Carolina at home, but these are not teams that had very much success over the course of last year, but they have a little bit more on the talent composite side of things than some of these other teams that they have on their schedule. I think that bodes well for them. The toughest game that I think is going to be on this schedule, I think the toughest 2 weeks that they're going to have is James Madison, Old Dominion. Those two both were incredible football teams last season. But the good news is again, you have those two games at home, and particularly with James Madison, we're looking under a brand new coaching staff, right? We're talking about Billy Napier at James Madison for the very first time. And the million-dollar question with James Madison, for as incredible a program that they've been over the last few years, are we going to see more of Sunbelt Billy that provided Billy Napier with the opportunity to coach at Florida and get that coaching opportunity a few years ago? Or are we going to see a little bit more of Florida Billy at James Madison that ended up getting him fired at Florida this past offseason? I think that's going to be really fascinating to see from that standpoint. Old Dominion, that's been a team on the rise in the Sun Belt as well, but at the same time, no Colton Joseph. He transferred over to Wisconsin. What are they going to look like as well? One thing that I do want to point out in terms of this offense, regardless of who starts at quarterback, because you mentioned that is more of a pro-style offense, I would not be surprised if Kenji Christian, the running back that transferred in out of Toledo, he is someone that becomes the vocal point of the offense, while maybe you get the quarterback acclimated, as well as some of the other pieces that they brought in as well. This is a guy that had over 700 scrimmage yards and 5 touchdowns this past season at Toledo. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Kenji Christian ends up being the vocal point of the offense, regardless of who wins that starting job at quarterback.
Yeah, and I think Jason's got the right mindset here. I think they only recruited like 7 guys out of high school, and they're bringing in 50 transfer players. So in this new age, that's the way to win early, and I think he understands that. He's got a lot of longevity in the guys that he's bringing from Toledo, and then he added a couple pieces, and the quarterback from Tennessee, some good defensive guys, and honestly, when I was looking at their offensive line, man, they've got size for their conference and for their them independent for their level of play. They've got some big guys on the offensive line. Doesn't mean they're going to be fundamental, but it does mean that they've got size. If you can get those guys dialed in, yeah, this is a team that could end up winning 8-9 games again this season. I could see it happening for sure.
Yeah, and to go off of AT's point about, size in the trenches, they did bring in 2, bigger defensive linemen. Melvin Hill's the third from Texas, and Jamel Howard Jr. from Wisconsin. They're both 300+ interior defensive linemen. I mean, we've said it plenty of times on the show before between all the speakers we have. Winning in the trenches is the number one key to victory. If you dominate the trenches on either side of the ball, your chances of victory significantly are higher. So I think controlling the trenches, I think those are 2 great additions. They also added safety Steve Miller from USC. I mean, if you watch their bowl game in the Fenway Bowl, they got torched in the secondary. So I think UConn definitely made some good additions in the portal. I had made a note about Kenji Christian, Jake. I think also with UConn losing Cam Edwards, I get it was a different coaching regime and everything like that, but that's a huge hole to fill in the backfield. Cam Edwards transferring to Michigan State is you're losing 1,000+ yard rusher out of your backfield. So I think Kenji Christian is definitely a good stable option to have out of that backfield, someone that you can rely on. You know what production you're going to get out of him. You know what he can bring to to an offense. So I think combining both your points, if you get the offensive line up to speed, along with the veteran running back from a system that he's familiar with, I think that's a recipe for, again, like AT said, like 8-9 wins on the schedule for sure.
Yeah, and then one last thing that I definitely wanted to touch on in terms of some players that I'm certainly watching for on this UConn football team is I do think that this linebacking core for UConn, particularly their duo that they brought in through transfer portal, I think they have a chance to be pretty good as well. Whether you're talking about Kayvon Sherman, who had nearly 100 tackles combined over the course of last season, and then they also brought in the FCS transfer in John Lista out of Penn. So you already know he's a very smart guy, getting that Ivy League education, probably using some physics on the whiteboard in order to, have some great all-time pursuit. But this is a guy that was also a multi-year starter. And really the most valuable thing that you could have before anything else is experience. And they're certainly going to have some experience in that linebacking core as well. So they have a chance to be pretty solid to pretty good in the trenches. And you're looking at that for both sides of the ball. Again, it's just a matter of what do they get out of that quarterback position. You're probably not expecting a Joe Vacano, but as long as your quarterback is competent, UConn can definitely make some noise with what's laid in front of them. And their bye week split, pretty good. I mean, it's right in the middle of the year. You can't complain in terms of where this singular bye ends up being at.
No, not especially when you get UMass right out the gate out of that bye. You can kind of yet again, don't overlook anybody in this game. But if there was one team that anybody could overlook, I'd say it'd be UMass. And I hate to just keep pounding on them all season, but I think that's a good one for them to come out to get some experience before you go into probably the hardest slate that they have all year. When you go Air Force, North Carolina, James Madison, Old Dominion, back to back to back to back, it's not an easy slate for them there. And yeah, I think that's the best time for you to get a bye week, just like you said. And I mean, and they also it seems like they're going for those twitchy style wide receivers, which I love, those fast guys that I think for smaller programs, that's the best thing you can have. It's so hard to get somebody that's going to go make a bunch of, Ross type catches or Moss type catches. I mean, and it's really tough to find those guys because they're all at the big programs, but you can go find some insanely talented, fast slot type guys that can change a game for somebody like UConn. And they've added several of those. One to talk about is Emmanuel Ross, who's a former 4-star out of high school. And yeah, I'm excited for them. This is going to be a team to watch, I think.
Yeah, and it's something that I always found fascinating, really looking at the biggest difference between like the power conference teams and really your G5 and your FCS teams. It's not your skill position guys, because no matter what level you go at, there is quality skill position guys at the wide receiver position, running backs, even to a degree. You can see quality quarterback play regardless of how low of division level you go into. Really, the biggest difference, if anything, is the trenches. But I think they're set up pretty nicely in the trenches. And as long as they remain healthy, because that's the $1 million thing, and UConn is maybe not one of those teams that has a ton of depth, which is a pervasive problem throughout the country given our current NIL era. As long as they can remain healthy, I think there is a pathway for them to have a successful season. We'll see what that record looks like. We're currently working through the the first look for all 137 FBS teams. So that I won't have an exact record prediction until March or April, to be honest with y'all. But I do think this UConn team, they certainly have some pieces to make some noise.